Thank you everyone for joining us today at the Rally for Freedom. Thank you for your patience as we get started. Across the state, community organizations, faith leaders, and directly impacted New Yorkers are celebrating the passing of historic pretrial reforms ahead of the January implementation. Today is a very special day to be celebrating these reforms because today is Human Rights Day. In 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This international agreement states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Today, we are celebrating one small step towards ensuring human rights to people all across New York State, with a dramatic reduction in pretrial detention across the state by eliminating cash bail and the possibility of pretrial detention for most misdemeanor and nonviolent felony charges. New York's current bail system fuels mass incarceration, violates constitutional rights, and wastes millions in taxpayer dollars being spent on pretrial detention. It also undermines the most basic protection of our legal system, the presumption of innocence. Rather than afforded due process, tens of thousands of New Yorkers each year are treated as guilty until proven innocent. And the racial disparities in the pretrial sentencing cannot be ignored, with Black pretrial detainees twice as likely as white pretrial detainees to spend at least one night in custody on bail. According to a report by the Vera Institute of Justice in Ulster County, 58% of the average daily jail populations are being held pre-trial. At the same time, in Ulster County, for-profit corporations are making hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit on commissary and phone calls for those being held in those jails. Between 2010 and 2014, over 2,000 of the people held pre-trial spent a week or more in Ulster County Jail without being convicted of a crime. Hundreds of these people are accused of simple violations. And may I remind you that a violation is not actually a crime. What would happen to your life if suddenly you were pulled away for a week? It seems like a game of Monopoly. You can sit and wait and roll the dice to see if you're able to get out, but if you're able to pay the money, you'll get out faster. But this isn't a game, this is real life, and it's happening to our neighbors right here in Ulster County and across the state, and it's got much more of an impact than missing a few turns of a game. Locked away on little more than an accusation, our loved ones and neighbors lose their jobs, their homes, and sometimes custody of their children. Because money bail ties liberty to wealth, low-income people or those who cannot afford bail are criminalized and languished in jail pre-trial. Poverty should not be a reason to keep people in cages. Today you will hear about the effects that bail has had on our community and why we are celebrating these pre-trial reforms. Our first speaker is going to be Takia Mitchell, a member of Citizen Action of New York.
Hello.
Hello.
I want to talk about my husband. My husband was incarcerated, and it was for a crime that he didn't commit. So for him to try to, show his innocence, he took it to trial. And at his trial, he was found guilty. He was found guilty and he was sentenced to 25 to life. Now, he went upstate to serve his time. Of course, devastated. That's like your whole life being taken away from you. What he found out and what his attorney found out during his appeal, because he put in for an appeal for his sentence, and it was found out that evidence was withheld from the trial, that the victim that was harmed wrote a letter stating that my husband didn't do the crime. So his appeal, the Supreme Court overturned his conviction and brought it back down to Ulster County Court for a retrial. Now, my husband, being scared and fearing for his life again, because he just basically felt like he lost his life to 25 to life, he was scared to take it to trial again. They offered him 6 to 8 years. And it was either that or take it to trial and, the chance of getting sentenced to 25 to life again. So he took the 6 to 8 years. Now, what's messed up about it is if the bail and discovery reform was back then, if that was available then, it would have never happened. They would have had to show the evidence that they have, everything. But it wasn't available then. So my husband lost years of his life for something that it shouldn't have happened. So this bill is very, very important. I just want to say that, and I cannot stress that enough.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for sharing that. Next up, we have Shannon Wong, the Hudson Valley Chapter Director of the New York Civil Liberties Union.
Thanks for having me here today. I always like coming up here to hang out with Callie and the crew. There's a ton of work to do all over the Hudson Valley, and a lot of that work is happening right here in Kingston. And I don't need to tell you all this, but it's an important reminder for those of us who might not be in the room and maybe watching on some other form of media. But people are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Right? And this year, lawmakers in Albany passed important pretrial reforms intended to make this principle closer to a reality in New York. But now opponents of these reforms, led by many district attorneys, are adamantly fighting this progress. They're using scare tactics and fear-mongering to frighten New Yorkers into believing that without evidence, that these changes will make us less safe. The truth is, these reforms will make our state fairer while doing nothing to impede public safety. Take the bail law that passed this spring. Beginning next year, under the new statute, people accused of most misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies will not be held on cash bail. This means that in most people's cases, the size of people's bank accounts will no longer determine who gets locked up and who gets released. This law moves us closer to realizing that nobody should be locked up because of their poverty. Today, under New York law, thousands, including many in the Hudson Valley, are in jail even though they haven't been convicted of anything. They are disproportionately people of color. Jail comes with a host of collateral consequences. People lose their jobs, people lose their children, people lose their homes. This is not only unfair, but it actually undermines public safety. Research indicates that detaining people pre-trial actually raises the risk to public safety. That's because pre-trial detention reduces your connection to the community. It reduces your connection to family support. It diminishes people. It increases economic insecurity and increases isolation. All of these things can contribute to difficult situations. We should be investing in job creation, in youth services, in substance abuse, in mental health programs. Those are the things that will make our communities safer. Mass incarceration will not solve these problems. The new law moves us closer to recognizing this while preserving a judge's discretion to decide what steps are needed to ensure that somebody returns to court. I'd like to say this over and over again, but bail in New York State is about ensuring that somebody returns to court, and most people do. Along with bail reform, lawmakers also passed legislation that will overhaul the discovery laws, which we just heard about can greatly impact somebody's cases. Under the current statute, prosecutors are allowed to withhold important evidence from defendants even up to the day before trial. In many cases, this evidence would help prove a defendant's innocence. The new law requires that defendants get to see that evidence in their case promptly. This reform should help prevent wrongful convictions and allow people accused of crimes to make informed decisions about their cases before they accept a plea and forfeit their right to a trial. We all want our communities to be safe, but the efforts by DAs and others to erase the progress we have made is not about public safety. They are about maintaining a system in which people who have money are set free and people who don't get locked up. They are about clinging to a discovery policy which eliminates the right to a fair trial so you can't see the evidence against you. And they are about making sure that mass incarceration, which rips families apart and destroys our communities, continues unabated. New York cannot afford to reverse course. We've got a lot of work to do to make New York a more just place, and that should be the goal heading into the next legislative session.
Thank you, Shannon. Next up, we have Reverend Roy McBain for the Clinton Ave United Methodist Church.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to look out and see so many people here today. To be honest, coming here, I really wasn't sure what to expect. But I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to see people I know. I'm glad to see people I don't know that I hope to meet before the end of our time together. And I'm very, very glad to be here today. Last Sunday, 2 days ago, at our church on Clinton Avenue, we lit the second candle of Advent. Advent is a season in the Christian community where we pause in the midst of the busyness of the holiday time in our world, and we remember. We remember the birth of Jesus so many years ago. We prepare ourselves to welcome him once again into our world and into our hearts, and we reflect on the gifts that he has given us. Jesus, we think of him as the Prince of Peace, the Prince of Peace. And in fact, much of the Judeo-Christian tradition and Jesus' words and his life testifies to this, that justice and peace are intertwined, right? And they are. Justice and peace are intertwined. When I think about justice, I think about being in right relationship with God. I think about being in right relationship with other people, about making it right between people. I also think too about fairness and equity and equality, the things that bring us all here today. We may have a lot of differences, but we are here today because we believe in those principles. And honestly, on some days, I just take a shortcut, and I remember how Jesus taught us that, hey, treat other people the way you want to be treated. That's justice too, friends. That's justice as well. And justice and peace, they go together. They are connected, right? What happens to peace if you take justice away? What kind of peace are you left with? Tell me, what kind of peace are you left with without justice? Hollow. Fake peace. Cheap peace. Peace that doesn't last. Justice and peace belong together. We're here today to celebrate, hopefully, that there's a story that we don't have to keep telling. And here's what the story is. The story is that there are two people, okay, maybe alike in many ways, two people suspected of the same crime. They await trial. They are each presumed innocent until they have their day in court, and so they're waiting. But person number one, boy, I'm used to walking around. I'm going to stay here though. But person number one reaches into a pocket and pulls out cash. And so where...
Your attention, probation closing in 10 minutes.
Okay.
10 minutes, thank you.
Pulls out some cash, and so where does person one get to go? Home. Right. To family, to friends, to job, to peace. Right? Person number two reaches into that pocket. We know the story. And if there's nothing there, where does person number two get to go? To jail. Now, I would not presume to say that God's peace could not be with anybody in jail. But my bet is that it's hard. It's hard to experience peace in jail. So justice and peace, they go hand in hand. Friends, I am grateful to be here today. I am grateful to live in a state where these pretrial and bail reforms have become legal. And you know what I'm most grateful about today? I thought about it. I am grateful for all the people who have worked so hard to bring about these changes. Many of whom are in this room. People who have worked hard and sacrificed time and money and time with friends and time at work. People who have thought about this and spoken about it and fought about it and written about it and listened about it and learned about it and rallied about it. Right? Right? We all just, how about this? Good job. I'm grateful to be here on Human Rights Day as we recognize and celebrate these changes in pretrial and bail reform. And my hope is that as we move forward, we can find more ways, new ways, and better ways to keep that connection between justice and peace, so that we can move ourselves and our world into even a better and more justice-filled place. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words. Our final speaker is Sean Petway, board member of Rise Up Kingston.
How you doing today? My name is Shannon Petway. I'm a board member of Rise Up Kingston. I was born in Poughkeepsie, but spent over half of my life here in Kingston. I have 7 children and 6 grandchildren. I'm involved in this work because I don't want them to go through what I went through with the criminal justice system. When I was 21 years old, I was arrested for a criminal sale of a controlled substance. For 8 months, I was in jail because I couldn't afford bail. And I waited and waited for evidence that ended up not existing. After a video and audio tape cleared my involvement in the sale, I was told that 2 detectives and an undercover witness he'd making the sale, a sale that I know I didn't make. The public defender told me not to go to trial, and I took a plea deal for 1.5 to 3 years instead of risking 5 to 15 years in prison. This story is very, very similar for many people across Kingston, Ulster County, and New York State. Pretrial detention has had devastating consequences. Most lose their jobs, their homes, custody of their children, and face the trauma of being locked up in a cage for days, weeks, or years at a time. Many of you know the story of Khalif Browder. He was a young boy arrested for stealing a backpack. He spent 3 years in Rikers Island. After turning down numerous plea deals, he was released due to lack of evidence. He later killed himself because of the trauma of being in jail. Khalif Browder refused plea deals, but many people don't. More than 90% of criminal cases end in plea deals. When you're under arrest in that jail, you'll do anything to get out. Without knowing the evidence that you have against you, people like myself waive their rights to trial. This year, New York State won legislation that will eliminate money bail and guarantee pretrial liberty for most misdemeanors and nonviolent felony charges. That's 90% of the arrests in New York State, and requires that prosecutors turn over all evidence 15 days arraignment and prior to any plea deal, and address some of the loopholes that violate our constitutional right to a speedy trial. If these laws was in place back then, I wouldn't have sat in jail for 2 years. We've been hearing a lot about how these bail reforms are bad and that criminals are going to be roaming the streets. People with access to money have always been able to pay their bail and roam these same streets. Right. We shouldn't have to pay for our pretrial liberty. I'd like to remind you that it should be innocent until you're proven guilty. But under the old laws, you've got to fight your way out just to prove your innocence. It's a lot harder to fight your case when you're trapped in jail, showing up to court in an orange jumpsuit that makes you look guilty to a judge and jury. When you're trapped in a jail, you're more likely to take plea deals so you can get on with your life. Even when you're innocent, you take the deal because you know the system is so stacked that you know a plea deal is the fastest way to get home. People who make bail are able to fight their cases much more easily because they're out. Their lives aren't as impacted because they can keep going to work, taking care of their kids, and just show up in court when necessary. People with money don't deserve better treatment than people without. We all deserve pretrial liberty. We also know that people return to court. The Brooklyn Bail Fund, who provides resources to help people pay their bail, show that 95% of the people they assisted return for their court dates. These numbers are similar across New York State. This is an opportunity for us to focus on investing resources in our community instead of jail. Our community needs mental health services, drug rehabs, and jobs. We don't need to invest more money in locking up innocent people. Nobody should be denied their right to justice, no matter how little money they have. We can and should do better here in Ulster County.
So, I know we are coming to the end of this. You wanted to say something? All right, come on up.
Okay, my name is Chandra Giles. I'm with the New York State Chaplaincy Task Force. And it's others that's in the room. We're in the jail 3-4 times a week. And now what they're doing, just because you get caught with pot, they're not even giving you a bail. So it's important that It's important that we stand up for what is right and know that it's important. There's some there, and I say to them, I say, well, what's going on with your case? They saying, no bail, you know, there's nothing going on. Some are there for 45 days, and they're not even indicted. No indictment, no nothing. They're just sitting there. This lady, she sat there for 2 years. 2 years. I had to go to the district attorney to find out what's going on. Why is she still sitting there? What is the problem? Why is she still sitting there in jail for 2 years and nothing is going on with her case? And so when I went to them, they said, oh, we had to send her to mental health. I said, no, no, no. Was nothing wrong with her. Nothing wrong with her. Y'all sent her there. Now let's get this case going. And thank God today she's out and she's working good.
There's so many stories like that across Ulster County and across New York State. You know, we've got weed dispensaries looking like Mac stores now, and we still have people sitting in court for them. So I would like to thank everyone for coming out today on Human Rights Day to celebrate these historic pretrial reforms. The people who benefit financially will always push back against providing liberty to people in our community. And I want you to know that when you are reading things and seeing things out in the community. Those who stand to lose money from people being free will always push back. So here are the facts. Bail reform is going to address some of the existing inequities within the pretrial systems. Bail and pretrial detention are not necessary to protect public safety or ensure that people will return to court. Bail reform will reduce jail populations across the entire state and save taxpayer money. Bail reform was thoroughly vetted and discussed by all those involved in the system, and support for pretrial reform in New York is high, including among survivors. So thank you to our partners at Citizen Action of New York, NYCLU, Clinton Ave United Methodist Church, and Kingston Midtown Rising for making today happen. Thank you to Radio Kingston for live streaming and broadcasting this. And I would like to remind each and every one of you that we only won these changes because of the unwavering advocacy of directly impacted people, and we must continue to fight for human rights in this state. Thank you.